Hey there, my friend. I'm genuinely thankful you chose to spend a few moments watching this video, and if you feel like subscribing, that would honestly mean a lot to me. But let's get right into it. It began like any typical day. Quiet, mundane, forgettable. But by 8 p.m., I found myself planted on my living room couch, my mother beside me, staring across the room at my wife and her parents, the tension between us so thick it felt like we were negotiating terms of a fragile ceasefire. My name is Ethan Walker, and until just recently, I was convinced I had the kind of marriage others would envy. My wife Lisa and I met during our final year of college, an all-nighter cramming for an economics final. Her smile was subtle, almost shy, but it carried an intensity that cut right through my carefully guarded emotions. We were married for 3 years, no kids, just routines that felt sacred in their simplicity. Sunday breakfast filled with sleepy banter, our coffee breaks a daily ritual, even our toothbrushes fell into rhythm. I loved her, completely, maybe too blindly. But now, facing me in our own living room, she seemed like a stranger occupying the body of someone I once adored. Her father, Frank Holloway, looked drained, the kind of tired that doesn't belong in a personal crisis. Her mother, Margaret, who insisted on avoiding the nickname Maggie, sat stiffly at the edge of the couch like a predator ready to strike. And what lay before us wasn't just a strained relationship, it was the wreckage of our life together. My mother, Susan Walker, sat quietly by my side, her hand wrapped tightly around mine. She'd given me her word that she wouldn't speak. I'd pleaded with her not to. I needed this confrontation to stay clear, composed, untouched by emotion. She agreed, although I could feel the effort it took for her to stay silent. Lisa had been staying with her parents since what I now called the event. Capital letters, a landmark in my mind. It happened a week earlier, at her sister's wedding. What should have been a night of celebration turned into the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about the woman I married. I caught her on the dance floor, not dancing really, more like provocatively grinding against her ex. I confronted her. She snapped, yelling, "You don't own me!" The room went still, frozen mid-toast, eyes locked on us. Then she disappeared, vanished for over an hour. When I finally found her, she was tucked behind the catering truck, kissing him, passionately. I lost it. My fists moved before I even registered them. I don't remember how many times I struck him, only the sound of her voice screaming, not for me, at me, telling me to stop, begging me not to hurt him. That's when something inside me cracked and never quite pieced itself back together. She tried to contact me afterward, dozens of missed calls, a flood of texts. I ignored all of them. Instead, I set up this meeting. Frank was the first to speak. "Ethan, thank you for giving us this chance. We know this must be incredibly hard." Hard? That word was too small. What I'd been through wasn't just painful, it was soul-shaking. Lisa's eyes were puffy, her face blotched from crying. And still, somewhere beneath the wreckage, I saw traces of the woman I once loved. But what happened that night had smashed through the foundation we'd built. "I don't want this to end," she whispered. "I don't want a divorce." I took a slow breath, steadying my tone. And I didn't want to see my wife locked in an embrace with her ex behind a food truck while her family celebrated love. Margaret immediately bristled. "There's no need to be crude," she said sharply. "You're sitting in my house, Margaret," I replied coolly. "If the honesty makes you uncomfortable, the door is right there." She stayed put, jaw tight, silent. Lisa's voice wavered as she tried to explain. "It was just a terrible lapse in judgment." "A lapse?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "Which part was the lapse? Dancing like you were chasing a high school fantasy, screaming at me in front of everyone we knew, or kissing him like no one else mattered?" "I'd had too much to drink," she said quietly. "I wasn't thinking, it just happened." "Just happened?" I echoed. "Are you saying the betrayal wasn't real, or that it wasn't planned?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I didn't feel moved by them. Not anymore. I'd grown numb to her sorrow. I'd seen it too many times. Frank leaned in, clearly trying to salvage what was left. Ethan, I know this seems impossible now, but people make mistakes. You two can come through this. I turned to him, my tone like ice. Maybe, Frank, if that wedding was the only mistake. Lisa stiffened. She knew what was coming next. I leaned back, voice flat. Someone sent me a video from the bachelorette party 3 weeks ago. Margaret narrowed her eyes. Your daughter wasn't just dancing with the hired performer, I said. There were touches, kisses, more than that. And she wasn't the only Holloway woman involved. Frank's face went pale. Margaret's mouth pressed into a hard line. Lisa began sobbing again, truly broken now. I didn't stop. Should I send the video to Mike, or would you prefer to do that yourself, Lisa? Margaret snapped. You smug bastard, acting like you've never done a single thing wrong. Frank looked like he might pass out. Margaret! She ignored him, pulled out a bulky envelope, and flung it across the table. Let's see how spotless you are. These are photos of your car, parked outside a motel, license matches, registration matches. So much for your halo. I glanced at the envelope, flipped through its contents, and looked up again. You're absolutely right, that's my vehicle, but I wasn't in it. I was in Chicago at a corporate workshop. 30 people can vouch for me. I've got hotel receipts, group photos, all time-stamped. I stood slowly. While I was gone, Lisa's car was in the shop. Guess whose car she borrowed? Everyone turned to Lisa, but I wasn't finished. And that motel? Registered under John Smith. Curious choice, considering Lisa works under a doctor. Samuel Jonathan Smith, 61, married, her supervisor. Margaret said nothing. Lisa crumbled. I turned to my mom. The documentation? Without speaking, Susan handed over a folder. It held my travel itinerary, all the proof. Lisa looked destroyed. I gave her one final statement. This conversation's over. You can all leave now. Margaret stood with a scowl. I really thought you were better than this. I met her stare. And I never expected anything different from you. They left, one by one. As Lisa crossed the threshold, she looked back at me. I never meant to lose you, she murmured. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because the truth was, she didn't lose me that night. She lost me a week earlier. What followed wasn't sorrow. It was something different. A kind of awakening. The start of something new. Once the apartment fell quiet, my mother finally let out a breath, like she'd been holding it the entire time. She came over and pulled me into her arms. For the first time since that awful night, I let myself break down in her embrace. You doing okay? She asked softly. I shook my head. Not even close, but I will be. She gave me a gentle nod and held me tighter. You managed that with more grace than your father ever could have mustered. A faint smile tugged at my lips. He'd have launched the coffee table across the room. Twice. We both let out a soft laugh. It felt strange, like a language I hadn't spoken in a while, but not entirely foreign. That night, sleep stayed out of reach. I wandered aimlessly through the house like some lost spirit, dragged down by everything that had unfolded. Her betrayal, Margaret's manipulations, Lisa's tearful excuses. But the heaviest thing was still the familiar ache lodged in my chest, one that had been there from the beginning. Still, something had changed. I'd crossed a threshold. I refused to keep drowning in this. I wasn't going to wear the victim label any longer. I was ready to act, with precision, not chaos. By the time Monday arrived, I had hired an attorney. Her name was Amanda Layton, razor-sharp, composed, and highly praised by one of my mother's closest friends. She specialized in family law and reputational defense. As she flipped through the folder I handed her, she looked up and asked, "You want to go nuclear or keep it surgical?" I didn't hesitate. Both, in that order. She gave a small, knowing smile, like she'd handled far worse. Then we play it smart. You've got solid evidence of the affair. That gives us leverage. But let me ask you this. How far are you really willing to take this? I took a breath before answering. I don't need to ruin her. I just want the world to know she ruined me. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. That I can make happen. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was done. Divorce. The grounds were infidelity, supported by digital evidence. I asked for a total division of our assets, no spousal support, and a gag clause forbidding her from contesting the terms or speaking publicly about the case. Amanda slid in one final question. Want to choose the time and place for service? I considered it briefly, then gave a nod. Sunday, after church. She smirked. Brutal, I like your style. At the same time, I filed a civil suit against Dr. Samuel J. Smith and his clinic. The claim? Professional misconduct, violating ethical standards by engaging in a relationship with a subordinate, Lisa. Amanda pulled in a seasoned medical law expert to make sure everything was airtight. Even if the case didn't stick, the clinic wouldn't welcome the scrutiny. Just as the legal machinery began turning, I got a text from an unknown number. We saw the Bachelorette video too. Want the unedited version? I stared at the message, unsure if I should feel nauseated or vindicated. I typed a single word in reply. Send. Within minutes, the file arrived. It was worse than I remembered. Stephanie, Lisa's sister, was clearly involved. So were two of Lisa's colleagues. They were laughing, groping, fully visible, faces and voices unmistakable. I didn't send it to Mike. Not yet. Instead, I messaged Stephanie privately. You've got 7 days to tell your husband, or I will. She didn't respond, but she read it. By Friday, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't apathy. It was clarity. A colder kind. I started going to the gym again, ate healthier, dived into my work. I wasn't just dismantling my old life, I was rebuilding it. But my retribution, that was still unfolding, carefully and cleanly. That Sunday, I sat in the back of Amanda's tinted SUV. We parked just outside the church, waiting. Lisa and her family emerged shortly after. She looked drained, haunted even. A process server walked straight up to her, handed her the envelope, and left without saying a word. Lisa stopped in her tracks, clutching the papers as if they'd scalded her. Margaret turned around, likely ready to unleash one of her righteous monologues, until she saw Amanda sitting beside me, calmly filming the scene on her phone. A silent record of how exposed silence could feel. Seconds later, Lisa's legs gave out. Her father caught her before she hit the ground. Amanda glanced my way. That was clean. Too clean, I murmured. I expected more drama. Oh, don't worry, she said coolly. Once the clinic sees the complaint we filed, the real explosion starts. I gave a nod, but deep down I knew this was no longer just vengeance. This was resurrection, and I was only getting started. Monday came with a knock on the door. My mom stood there holding 2 steaming coffees, her expression as fierce as ever. Figured you could use the strong kind, she said, striding in like she owned the place. I always do, I replied, taking a sip and leaning back. I'm guessing you heard? Her smile was sly. Honey, in this town, everyone heard. Somehow the Bachelorette video had leaked. No one knew how or from where, but it spread through the community like wildfire. Lisa had become the poster child for small-town scandal. As for Margaret, she was livid. She tried spinning it during Sunday service, calling the footage fake, a cruel fabrication, jealous sabotage. But the video was crystal clear. The sound, unmistakable. No one believed her. I kept my distance and let the chaos unfold on its own. Meanwhile, Amanda submitted a formal complaint to the state medical board. The filing read like a legal grenade, complete with timelines, names, and violations. By Friday, the board had launched an official investigation into Dr. Smith. The lawsuit was in motion. But what I didn't see coming, Lisa showing up at my doorstep. It was a bleak Wednesday night. Rain clung to the windows like shadows. I heard the knock, and there she was, soaked to the bone, clutching a worn folder. I shouldn't be here, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But I need you to understand something. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, the warmth of the house stopping just behind me. She looked different. older somehow, defeated. Whatever arrogance she once carried was gone. She extended the folder toward me. "These are my payslips and pages from my journal. I need you to know it wasn't all what it looked like." I didn't move to take it. Her voice wavered. "Ethan, I was sinking. He didn't force me, but he saw where I was weak and used it. I was terrified of failing at work, at our life together. I ended up destroying it instead." I glanced at the folder but still didn't reach for it. She stepped closer. "You don't owe me anything, especially not forgiveness. I want you to know I regret everything." For the first time, I truly looked at her, and what I saw wasn't just a traitor. I saw a woman undone by her own choices, but that didn't mean I owed her closure. "I believe you," I said quietly, "but that doesn't fix what's broken." Her eyes glistened. "Will you at least talk to your lawyer about removing the gag clause? I'm getting torn apart online. I can't even go to the store without whispers." I didn't answer immediately. Then, "No." Her voice cracked. "Why not?" "Because I gave you 3 years of my life, and you gave them to someone else while lying to my face. That clause? It's the only thing keeping me from having to hear your version of the truth." She stood there a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the rain. With every step she took away from me, something inside lifted. Days later, the clinic released a discreet public statement. Dr. Samuel Smith had stepped down for personal reasons. Whispers had begun circulating that his medical license was no longer valid. Around the same time, Lisa had resigned from her position and moved back in with her parents. But even in the familiarity of her childhood home, peace was still out of reach. Frank contacted me, not for help, but to apologize. "She's in pieces, Ethan," he confessed, "and I can't pretend we weren't part of what caused it." I acknowledged his apology, but that was all. I wasn't offering anything else. Instead, I turned inward and forward, channeling my energy into something constructive. I started drafting plans for a healthcare consulting firm of my own. Some of the connections I'd made during that seminar in Chicago were intrigued. They were eager to collaborate. I registered my LLC, built a professional pitch deck, and threw myself into a project rooted not in pain, but in purpose. Within a matter of weeks, I'd secured 3 contracts and leased a humble office suite. One afternoon, my mom showed up carrying a tray of cupcakes and wrapped me in a hug so tight I had to catch my breath. "You see," she murmured, "you weren't just meant to survive, you were meant to thrive." And she was right, but I wasn't finished yet. 3 months went by, and not once did I look back. My company, Walker Medical Strategies, took off with a momentum I hadn't dared to expect. What began in a tiny office soon grew into a business serving 5 different clients in under 3 months. I partnered with clinics, overhauled patient flow systems, and even facilitated a seminar on compliance with healthcare regulations. Each success put more distance between me and the ruin I'd left behind. But the past rarely stays buried for long. It started with a voicemail I didn't see coming. "Hey Ethan, it's Mike, Stephanie's Mike. There's something you should hear, call me." I hadn't heard from Mike Sanders since the night everything came crashing down. That night, the one where truth exploded in our living room, his voice now sounded frayed, raw, like he'd uncovered something devastating in his own space. I called him back. No greetings, no small talk. "Why the hell didn't you tell me?" he snapped. "I gave her time," I said calmly. 1 week. She chose not to use it. "I found a video last night," he said, "buried in an old email thread. Watched it more times than I care to admit. Then I grabbed my stuff and walked." "Where are you now?" I asked. "Crashing with my brother in Denver. It's over. I've already filed the papers." I let the silence stretch. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he replied. "Honestly, I think you did me a favor." We ended the call. The silence that followed was thick with familiar grief. Another home, broken. Another man now carrying the burden I once barely escaped. But unlike me, Mike hadn't disappeared into the shadows. Maybe that's the difference between recovery and collapse. Days later, Amanda called. The clinic's reached a settlement, she said. It's under wraps. What kind of figure are we talking? I asked. High 6 digits, she answered. My hand shook as I set down my coffee. And the license? I pressed. Gone, she confirmed. Dr. Smith won't be seeing patients in this state again. I exhaled deeply. It wasn't about the money, it was about proof that the truth hadn't just evaporated into silence. There's more, Amanda added. Lisa's attorneys contacted us. I sighed. What is it this time? They're proposing changes to the divorce agreement. She wants to speak during her clinic's new hire orientation on accountability, mental health, the mistakes she's made. Says it's part of how she's choosing to heal. I didn't respond immediately. Amanda continued. I told them it seemed unlikely you'd allow that, but I'm starting to think I might be wrong. Let her, I said. If talking about it helps her move forward, I won't stand in her way. You sure? Yeah, I said. Let her own that story. I don't need to carry it anymore. Because I was holding on to something else now. At a healthcare conference in Atlanta not long after, I met Sarah Whitmore, an attorney with sharp instincts, dry wit, and a cool authority behind her glasses. We clashed during a panel about patient rights and systemic accountability, and later laughed about it over cocktails. Our connection didn't rely on charm or flattery. It was forged in honesty, debate, and shared depth. She pushed me. I pushed back. Somewhere between briefcases and late flights, she became the calm in the chaos. No games, no timelines, we simply fit. 2 years later, we exchanged vows in a small ceremony by the sea. No headlines, no theatrics, just us, our closest loved ones, and the life we'd rebuilt from the ashes. When our daughter Emma was born, I cradled her and whispered, "You saved me, sweetheart," without even trying. Sarah smiled gently. "No," she said, "you saved yourself." And she was right. Because true revenge isn't about vengeance. It's about building a life they'll never be able to touch. 5 years have gone by, 5 turbulent, humbling, extraordinary years since the night my marriage unraveled under the weight of betrayal and denial. And here I am now, seated in a bright office, running one of the region's fastest-growing healthcare consultancies. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, warming the room where industry awards sat beside family photos and neatly labeled contracts filled the shelves. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Walker, your wife called. Dinner with your parents is at 6. Also, the reporter from Business Weekly just arrived." "Thanks, Janet." The door opened and a young journalist stepped in, early 30s, nervous, gripping his notepad like a lifeline. "Mr. Walker, I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on another incredible quarter. Our readers are fascinated. How did you go from nothing to this?" I leaned back, offering a calm smile. "Hitting rock bottom is the most honest place to start. It teaches you exactly what you'll never tolerate again." He scribbled fast. "Your firm has a reputation for leading with integrity. Is that personal?" "Absolutely," I said. "When the people who were supposed to protect you don't, you learn how to protect others better." He paused, cautious. "Would you be okay discussing the divorce? It's on public record, but I don't want to cross a line." "It's fine, just keep it professional." He relaxed a bit. "There were rumors, lawsuits, retaliation. Did your ex-wife really fight the settlement?" "She did. But the evidence, her affairs, workplace violations, it was all documented. There wasn't much room for sympathy." Another pause. "Do you regret how things ended?" I didn't answer immediately. I opened a drawer, pulled out an old, worn envelope. No label. Still sealed. "I wrote her a letter once," I said, turning it slowly in my hands. "Never sent it. It was filled with everything I wished she'd hear. Eventually, I realized it didn't matter if she read it. I just needed to say it. For me." "Do you still think about her?" I glanced over at the photo on my desk. Sarah mid-laugh, holding Emma in a patch of golden light. "Not in the way you'd think," I said quietly. "I don't miss her, but I am grateful. If she hadn't broken me, I might never have learned what I was truly worth." He scribbled one last note, then looked up. "So what do you think you're worth now, Mr. Walker?" "I just want peace. I said quietly, rising to my feet. The kind of peace that only exists among people who never make me question my value. He gave a small nod, clasped my hand with silent understanding, then turned and walked away. That evening, Sarah greeted me at the front door with her arms stretched wide, and Emma came running toward me, fingers sticky with paint, cheeks splattered with color, eyes sparkling with excitement. "Daddy, we made something for you!" She held up a crayon drawing, a crooked little house, a lopsided heart floating above it, and 3 stick figures, hand in hand. Above it, scrawled in shaky letters, were the words, "This is our happy." I knelt down and kissed her forehead. "It truly is," I murmured as we all sat down for dinner with my parents. Mom's pot roast sat steaming in the middle of the table, its aroma wrapping the room in comfort, while Dad shared old stories that had Emma giggling uncontrollably. And in that moment, something within me shifted, something soft, something steady. It wasn't about settling the score anymore. It was about recovery. Not from what others had done to me, but from the belief I once held, that I was too damaged to ever feel whole again. Later that night, after the house had quieted, I stepped out onto the porch. In my hand was that letter, still sealed. I held it over the fire pit and watched as the flames devoured it. Because real justice doesn't come from revenge. It comes from building a life so rich in love, so firmly rooted in peace that those who hurt you wouldn't even recognize the way back in. And with that, this chapter comes to a close. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you for being part of this space. If this resonated, there are more stories here waiting for you. Until we meet again, take care.